Hi, and welcome to the Life as a Therapist podcast. My name is Kimberly Valdez, and today we're talking about having a chronic illness as a therapist. Welcome back to the podcast. As you may be able to tell, we've taken a little bit of a break. We did take a break for the Christmas holidays and then realized with the busyness of life and business that it's actually going to work better to do a seasons model. And so this is officially season 2 of Life as a Therapist, and we are going to have 6 episodes between now and the end of May. This first one, we get to start with the person who first interviewed me, the amazing S.J. Knowlton, and we're going to be talking about chronic illness, something that is especially important to us in our practice, but that is pervasive in this country. In the United States, 60% of adults are managing at least one chronic illness, 40% are managing at least two. And SJ is going to talk about her journey being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as an adult, which is incredibly rare.
Yeah, really rare. Most people get diagnosed in like childhood.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the last time I looked at the stats, it was about a quarter of us get diagnosed in our late 20s, but it's just not something you hear very often.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Mm-mm.
So just very quickly remind everyone who you are.
Yeah, I'm SJ Knowlton. I'm an LPC, and I specialize in anxiety, trauma, women and LGBTQ issues. Um, and yeah, that's me.
Okay, yes, and we're so happy to have you back. What what brought you to this place? How long have you been dealing with type 1 diabetes now?
Um, so it's super fun. My trauma anniversary is St. Patty's Day.
Oh, how fun. What a nice thing to remember.
Right? It's like every year. It's hard to forget. But it's fun. I get to go have a beer with my friends and laugh about it. So it'll be 3 years this year since I was diagnosed. Yeah. So it's about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago exactly.
Okay. So St. Patty's Day,
Mhm.
2022.
Yes.
What what happened?
Um, Basically, I was so sick. Like looking back on it, I'd been getting sick progressively for like probably, I think it had started maybe 6, 7 months before then. Just weird symptoms like being really thirsty all the time, like really dry skin, like I was rapidly losing weight, um, and I was also going through a big breakup at the time. So I kept thinking that was it, like that I was just really
Huh.
stressed, right? Um, but
Especially in your late 20s, that's what you expect. Like,
yeah,
no, I'm just like, this just really sucks right now, and I
yeah, I'm
feel
just
it in my body.
having a hard time. Yeah, and I actually went into work and it was just like a small group of us for a case consult and I looked so bad and I felt so bad. I was having a hard time breathing and my coworkers basically begged me to like move a client and go to urgent care. And then I did and my EKG came back abnormal, so they sent me to the emergency room. And then the emergency room was like, surprise, you're in what it's diabetic ketoacidosis. So it's basically like your body is so full of sugar
Mhm.
but at the same time, it cannot process the sugar, right? Because diabetes is like the pancreas is not producing insulin, and insulin is like what helps you break down sugar. So my
Mhm.
pancreas was not producing insulin anymore, but my body desperately wanted sugar, like it
Yeah.
wanted nutrients, but it couldn't process them. So at that point, your body is so full of sugar, it can't process it. And so your body essentially thinks you're dying. It thinks you're starving. So it starts to eat your organs and like your fat, which is why I was losing all that weight, right?
Yeah.
And if like left unchecked, that can kill you long term, right? And so my EKG was abnormal. My sugars were really, really high. So they were like, surprise, you have diabetes. And I was like, what? And they're like, it's type 1. And I was like, what? And then they were like, okay, get in this ambulance, see you at the hospital.
Yeah.
Um,
So if I am Googling this correctly,
mhm.
diabetic ketoacidosis is when there's like a life-threatening buildup of acids in your blood,
Yes. Yeah.
which comes from your body not processing sugar over a prolonged period of time. or
Right.
over a certain period of time?
Good time. Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, it was probably like months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky. I mean, this sounds morbid, but I mean, like I could have just died in my sleep, honestly. Yeah, if diabetics, like if we have too low of blood sugar or too high of blood sugar, we can like slip into comas. And that's a lot of what used to happen in worst case scenarios, like back before we had a lot of the technology we have now. Um,
Yeah. I feel like that people, because diabetes has one increased in its prevalence in our society, especially with type 2 diabetes, but even among type 1 diabetes.
mhm.
Um, but it kind of becomes something that people joke about, or that everyone's like, oh, yeah, I know someone who's diabetic, and aren't thinking about that this is a disease that, if not managed properly, absolutely is life-threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think and like, I feel really bad for people with type 2, especially. There's so much stigma around it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so sad. Like, no one deserves to have bad things happen to their body or to get sick, right?
Yeah, well, and I want to correct what I just said, because I said if not managed properly. Even when managed properly,
Bad stuff happens.
bad
Yeah.
stuff happens. And insulin pumps break. Your glucose monitor isn't reading things correctly.
Mhm.
Um, and you you don't have full control over how your body is responding to the food that you're putting in it, or how it's processing any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some people, like they capped the price of insulin finally, but you still have to pay for it. Like some
Yeah.
people ration their insulin, like can't afford the readers. Like I have a Dexcom, which like attaches to my body and
Mhm.
to my phone. Um, but like some people can't afford that, right? So it's a, it's expensive to be sick too, you know,
Incredibly
and that
expensive.
could keep you more sick.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to your experience.
Mhm.
You are you're in a case consultation meeting, and
Mhm.
you have to reschedule your client so you can just go get checked out at urgent care, which ends up being a hospitalization for ketoacidosis. What
Mhm.
happens next?
Um, just an awful hospital stay. I was um like a step down from intensive care, but still pretty intensive. But they like came in every hour and took my blood sugar and woke me up because they have to stick you with a needle and they're just like trying to get it down. But there just wasn't a lot of, and I think what we forget too is like when we're really sick, you can't think clearly. So I just really didn't know what was happening. In a lot of ways, it wasn't really like real to me. And I was really lucky. Like my family's in town; they're so lovely. My mom would come and stay with me, and like
Mhm.
two of my best friends came to visit. But I was in that unit for like 3 or 4 days, and then they moved me to like a regular hospital room, and I
Mhm.
was there for like a night, and then they released me
Mhm.
um, with like they were like, all right, here's like your prescription for insulin and needles and your Dexcom, and one day like you know try to find a good endocrinologist. Good luck out there, kid. Like it was there was a little bit of education,
Yeah.
but again, I was like not. It was near the end of my
You're
stay, so I was
still
therapy.
recovering and trying to think
Yeah,
clearly,
but
because
I was also just so much information, you
yes,
know.
there's a very, very heavy learning curve for managing diabetes.
Yes.
In fact, many years ago, they put on very specific trainings from the American Psychological Association about the mental health impact of managing diabetes. And there is a non-DSM diagnosis, but still a diagnosis that is commonly used, called diabetes distress,
Oh,
because
I
of
didn't even know this. This is crazy.
the level of distress that it can cause to manage a chronic illness like diabetes, which requires consistent attention all day, every day,
Yeah, a lot of
for the rest of your life.
the rest of your life. Yeah, like a lot of just a lot of like mental energy you're spending on
Yeah.
everything, like everything you put into your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
been
you're leaving the hospital feeling confused, probably scoring very high on that diabetes distress scale.
definitely very high on it. And at the same time, like I want to take, I think I took one day off and then I went back to work, like, because I'd already missed 4 days.
Yeah.
And it's funny now, it was pretty like surreal at the time. Like I had a client fire me because I was in the hospital. They were
Well,
like, how dare you move me again? Like like I've tried to make this work. I can't. Like I don't want to see you anymore. And I was like, okay. I was like,
yeah. What did you end up communicating with clients about what happened?
a lot of them, it's so funny. A lot of them, unless they got canceled in that time period, didn't know.
Mhm.
Um, and some of them asked if I was okay. Um, the majority of them were just like, you good? And then we just did our session, like,
Yeah.
which is fine. Like, I don't want my clients to be worried about me or like trying to take care of me. I don't think
Mhm.
that's kind or appropriate for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was definitely so surreal to like go straight back to work and like have people talking to me about stuff that felt like so small in comparison, right? Like, it was
Well,
very,
I feel like that is um a normal therapist experience to have something life-changing happen.
mm,
And for the majority of your clients to not know about it.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
but then at the same time, the human experience of that is really unsettling.
Hmm.
Of what, how I'm just talking to people all day, every day that have no idea that I almost just died.
Yeah, it was. And I truly believe like no, it's not. I always joke like there's no such thing as the struggle Olympics. Like, no one's like getting crowned winner of having the worst time. Like I think all pain is valid and should be acknowledged. But like it was definitely put to the test when I yeah, when like, I would just be sitting there being like, yeah, like I almost died and like you're mad about this or upset about this. Like and I'm not proud of that, but it definitely went through my head a few times. And it was just like, yeah, very surreal. But just the disconnect between like my reality and the presented reality within the therapy room.
Yeah, and it is much harder to be as compassionate as we want to be to
Mhm.
other people's pain whenever you are still
Yeah.
processing your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it was helpful. It was like a good break from my own
Yeah.
pity party for sure. Um, and yeah, and sometimes it was hard to be present for sure.
What did it look like for you to learn how to manage your diabetes? And, what did that look like in session? Were you having to snack more, or were you getting alerts on your
Oh
Dexcom?
my God, the Dexcom alerts are the devil. They finally have changed the settings so they don't go off all the time. And you could change them a little bit, but they finally, like, I think heard us that it's so, yeah, it would be, I think that was more my issue, like, more than snacking, would be like I had to, like, give myself a shot really quick because my Dexcom would just be, like, screaming. If you haven't heard a Dexcom, it is the worst sound in America. It is just, it's just like, it's very loud and grating, which it's supposed to be because they want you to hear it even if you're asleep.
Mhm.
It is just, yeah, when someone's like really getting vulnerable on your Dexcom is like, you're like, you're so important to me. I'm so sorry. Like, I also can't turn it off or put it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was more how it changed. But I definitely felt it was frustrating because I felt better than I had for like months, right? But it
Yeah.
was like came with all this because my brain was finally like not starving anymore, probably. But
Yeah.
but it came with all this like crap that I didn't really know how to navigate or like gracefully. So
So how do you navigate that when you have to give yourself an insulin shot during session?
yeah, I now I do it less, like things feel more controlled and like my Dexcom just like again, we've changed the alert settings, thank God. Um, but I would just be like, I'm so sorry. I just have to do this really quick. And I would kind of like turn away, give myself a shot, or pull out a snack. And sometimes I would like offer them part of the snack, and sometimes it was like, sorry, this is my snack.
Yeah.
Bring your own.
Are you explaining what you're doing, or are you
Yeah,
just saying I have to take care of a health thing?
yeah, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I just have to do this really fast. And I usually tend to make it kind of jokey. Like I like to joke. I'm like, oh, I just gotta shoot up real quick or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I will
I
stab myself, that sort of thing.
yeah, and I think that that is the most um I think that's a very appropriate thing for a therapist to do. Because if I am, people will disagree with this, but if I am being like secretive, but I'm having to pull out an insulin pen and then not talking about it,
Yeah.
especially whenever you're in the middle of an emotional moment and you have to do that for you to continue functioning,
Yes.
um, uh, it feels disingenuous to not
Yeah.
own what's happening.
Yeah, it does. And I think at the same time, it feels hard. 'Cause again, I don't want to make it about me,
Yeah,
right?
it
This
is.
is
It's
their
also quite
time.
vulnerable.
Yeah, it's very vulnerable. Like, sometimes you have to just having this like an illness, like you just have to be vulnerable with people that like you didn't really want to be. You
Yeah,
don't really get to choose if you have to tell them or not, if you want to tell them or not, I should say.
yeah.
Yeah. Which like it's pretty whatever most of the time, but yeah, it feels bad as a therapist to be like, okay, and now like here's like a 5 minute obligatory conversation we have to have about me when
Mhm.
you were talking about something, and it's my job to listen to you, you know.
Yeah. So what does that conversation sound like? How do clients normally react to it?
Majority of them are just like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, everything's good." Or they'll be like, oh, "Okay, cool," and then just like keep going, which is great
Yeah.
too. Like neither one bothers me. Sometimes they'll ask like more questions about it, but like I think they kind of get the vibe that like it's not that I don't want them to, I just don't want them to feel like they have to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is like the therapist-y thing that we do of, oh yes, and how do you manage whenever you have stressful moments and have to be vulnerable? Like,
Hmm.
how can I turn this into a moment that comes back to you?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Like, are you feeling like you have to worry about me now?
Yeah.
So sometimes it can be helpful in that way. But mostly people are like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like they've all seen the commercials there, or like they watch the Disney Channel show with a diabetic or whatever. So they're
Yeah.
like, gotcha.
Does that feel relieving to you when they're nonchalant about it, or does it feel a little odd?
That's both,
Mhm.
like, and just generally, I don't, it's, I think it's similar to disclosing anything hard, right? Where like, I think we all, like, if someone tells you like they lost a parent or a spouse or, comes out to you or tells you they have like this illness, right? There's like this moment where you're like, it's like choose your adventure where like all your options spread out in front of you and you're like,
Yeah.
the correct thing to say here, like what is
Yeah,
appropriate?
we go through the self-disclosure decision tree.
Yes. Yeah. And I think in return, they go through their own responses, right? Of they're telling me something, but like, how do I want to like stop it, acknowledge it,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it feels both. It feels like nice that we could just move on because like I have to think about it enough.
Yeah.
And it also feels like strange for them to know something about me in
Yeah.
that way, you know?
Have you ever had another client talk about their type 1 or type 2 diabetes?
Yeah. Right when I got diagnosed, I had a client with type 2. And they kind of like, or they were like on the verge of becoming type 2 and they brought themselves back from the precipice. And I remember feeling jealous. Um, I was
Yeah,
like,
like, oh. You can just change your diet and not have to deal with this.
Yeah, like that's super nice. I'm glad your body still works. Um, like I genuinely am. Uh,
Yeah.
and also sad I don't get that choice, right? And then I have had like a type 1 client, and she felt really relieved that I like understood. And I also felt relieved to hear her talk about it, that it didn't, because everyone just talks about type 1s just having to be perfect all the time, just never eat a carb, like work out all the time as much as you can, like, and then everything will be fine, right? If your blood sugar is not totally stable all the time, you're doing something wrong, is kind of like the vibe that
Mhm.
people give a lot of times. And it can be really like, it can become this like moralizing thing.
Mhm.
Um, and so to
Tell me
hear,
more about that.
yeah, it's like, if your blood sugar is high, like you must have done something, you must have eaten something you shouldn't have. What did you eat? Like, that's bad. You're bad. You ate something bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, if your blood sugar is low, it's like, well, why weren't you paying any attention? You need to eat something, but don't eat too much of it because then it'll get high. And then you'll have to take insulin and then it might get too low again. So you have to, yeah. So and then, if your A1C raises, your doctor might be like, I have a really cool doctor now, but your doctor might be like, well, what happened here? And it's like, I don't know, Sharon. That was 6 months ago. Like, like I haven't thought about it. Like, and it's like maybe I just went to a birthday party and wanted a slice of cake, or my
Yeah.
partner made me pasta or whatever, and I didn't or forgot to take my insulin. That happens too, right? Like,
Mhm.
so it can become like this game of like shame and like perfectionism, that's not really the reality of it. Like, again, your body's just going to do what it does. Everyone's body is different.
Mhm.
And even if I never ate carbs again, it wouldn't fix anything.
Just be magically perfect.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the emotional impact of your diagnosis?
Well, at first I didn't deal, I think,
Mhm.
kind of. I felt really angry,
Yeah.
which, as we know from our stages of grief, is very common, right? Okay.
You're having to grieve the life that you had before and grieving having a healthy body.
Hmm. Yeah. And, and then there's all like grieving. I don't know, the first time I used a Dexcom, I felt like so dysmorphic having something stuck to my body all the time. It felt really upsetting.
Mhm.
And it was just like and then everyone the whole time is like, oh, but it's so easy and you just stick it on, and like they're so much smaller than they used to be. And
Mhm.
like I just kept coming back to like, but I shouldn't have to do this, right? Like I
Yeah.
shouldn't have to. So I felt really, I didn't not take care of myself. I took my insulin and I went to my appointments and like I moved my body. Um, but I definitely like didn't read a book about it or even really Google it, or like I really did not want to talk about it. Like, which really frustrated my mother. I love her. She loves me so much and she wanted to make sure I was okay. And she's a medical professional. So I'd be like, she'd ask me a bunch of questions. I'd be like, I don't know. She'd be like, I need you to know for me,
Yeah.
like, um,
What kind of things did she want you to know? Do you remember?
she'd just be like, well, what was your last A1C? And I'd be like, I don't know. It was within normal limits.
Oh, yeah, but she also is like searching for some level of control
Yeah,
because she's
absolutely.
so scared for you and grieving you not having to worry about your health in such a serious way.
Yeah, and
And
she's such a
like,
go-getter. Like I really admire that about her. She loves to find a solution. She loves to
yeah.
research. Yeah, and I just wasn't ready. Like it took me about like a full year and a half before I was like, I really just decided like I think I should go do EMDR actually. And I do EMDR if like I'm trained in it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just decided like, yeah, I think I've kind of just been in denial of like how big this is and like how frightening it was to almost die, and um like how my life has changed since then.
Mhm.
So that kind of was the turning point for me, was when I decided to do that.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about your EMDR experience.
Um, I mean, it was really hard. Like I felt I've done EMDR before and I did it like during training. You have to like practice on each other. All right. And but I really felt for my clients like because our first session was like me just telling her everything and then her being like, okay, well, we'll start next time, and I was like, okay, well, I just like opened my trauma box and like,
Mhm.
um, but
Like,
she
no, we start now. We fix this now.
yeah, I was like, I will pay for another hour right now. Like,
Mhm.
not her fault, obviously. That's just the nature of the protocol that we have to do with EMDR. But yeah, I remember just being like, man, I feel sorry for every client that I've done this to. So now I try to like sometimes try to like build in like a meditation thing at the end or whatever. But we're thinking that really vividly. But yeah, the EMDR experience was really hard but good, and it just it helped me let go of that, like what we were talking about earlier, that like moralizing of it.
Yeah.
Um, and like it helped me reconnect with my body and not feel so angry with it. Um, and like make me want to take care of it instead of like wanting wanting to ignore it, right? Like, and so that was all really good and cool and helpful. And like, and I also, yeah, just kind of not, I haven't fully made peace with it. I still don't think it's cool or fair, you know, and I
I
wouldn't
don't
wish it on anyone, but
I don't know if that's a realistic expectation for you to just have total peace.
no, I don't think so either. Yeah. But I definitely feel, yeah, just less angry about it. And I'm kind of able to just like talk about it more in depth without getting like really overwhelmed or shutting down or yeah. So it was awesome. I recommend. Obviously, I mean I'm a little biased, but having done it myself after being trained, I double recommend. It is a really helpful tool.
Mhm. You said earlier, kind of as you were talking about EMDR, that there was a time when you wanted to just keep ignoring your body, but you learned how to listen to it and be okay with having to listen to it instead. What do
Yeah,
you think went into you wanting to ignore your body?
a lot.
Mhm.
um, Part of it's like that I did have an eating disorder for a long time, and um, I kind of like finally kind of made more peace with that and was doing like intuitive eating and then I got sick and I didn't know I was sick and I like lost a ton of weight. And then when my body started working again, like it's really common, like when you've lost a ton of weight for your body to
Mhm.
gain a ton of weight, like
Yeah.
to compensate,
Mhm.
because it's like, oh my God, like if we starve again, we'll have more padding, right?
Yeah,
Like
we
it,
got to keep those stores up. Our bodies are trying to be really smart, but it also really messes with our head in such a
yes,
body-focused, perfectionistic society.
absolutely. And it's also just like, and it would just feel like another way that my body was out of control, right? It was
Yeah.
like, and it was just frustrating, like, and for so many different reasons, like not like just taking like the messed up world we live in and just being like you have to go buy clothes and like you have to like get used to the way your body is again and so it was like a mix of like that was really hard and I wanted to ignore my body because it just felt overwhelming. And
Yeah.
then I also wanted to just ignore it because it was like, it just felt like, I think the Dexcom is part of this. And like, I understand that's a very helpful tool, but just screaming at you all the time, like,
Mhm.
give me something, take something away from me, give me something, take something away from me. And I was like, I just don't want to think about you. Like, I know I have to, but that makes me not want to do it, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just seeking to be able to have some level of control of yourself again.
Yeah.
And one way we can control is by ignoring intentionally.
Yeah. Just, I would do bare minimum for sure. Yeah. And just not think that hard about it and just after the fact kind of try to correct it, um, which is a harder way to do it, honestly. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we have to learn that lesson in so many realms of our life. Of doing things the hard way because you're mad you have to do it in the first place, until you finally are able to be accepting, and then you're like, oh, wait, this is easier. Why
Yeah.
wasn't I doing this all along? Because
Yeah.
mentally my brain was saying, F you, I'm not going anywhere near this.
This is so overwhelming. I'm
Yeah.
so mad I have to do it. Like, it's annoying. It's pain. It sucks to stick yourself with needles. Like, yeah. And carry insulin around. Like, yeah. So I definitely, yeah, wanted to ignore my body. And then maybe also that was a way of punishing it for not, I felt like very betrayed by it,
Yeah.
you know?
Betrayed by your body.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like being diagnosed as an adult with type 1 diabetes is kind of a worse nightmare situation for eating disorder recovery.
Yeah. Because it was like, oh, now you spent so much time like learning how to not think about carbs and sugar, and now this is your life. You have to think about carbs and sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really, I was like, that's some peak irony right there. It's it's good stuff, you
I
know.
mean, that is a huge added challenge in your own recovery and in the management of your chronic illness,
Mhm.
is that what you're doing is constantly has the potential to be triggering for you.
Yes, yeah. And it's like again, like the moralizing, the villainizing of
Mhm.
food and behaviors and yeah, it was really hard. And I think that's part of why I ignored it too. I was like, I was afraid to get back into that mindset, like fully.
Yeah, that would be really scary.
Hmm. Yeah, it was really scary. And like, I think I had a doctor and then she left, and then I got a different doctor who like was just very like, just don't eat carbs kind of thing. And then I have a new doctor. She's great. Highly recommend. And she was like, well, that doesn't work to not eat carbs. Like, you have to eat carbs. And like, diabetics who don't eat carbs have higher blood sugar levels, which I was like, what? So it was interesting. Yeah. So there's just so much, there's so, like, the science is always changing, our knowledge is always changing. And like, I think people want it to be black and white because then it's less scary, right? Like,
Yeah.
just do everything correctly and you won't get diabetes. And if you do get diabetes, just do everything correctly and you won't struggle with it for the rest of your life. And it's just not that simple.
No,
That's an
it is not
illusion.
that simple. And I think admitting that it's not that simple can be really scary for people
Mhm.
because then it means that they can't stop bad things from happening to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I get it. I would like to believe that as well, that we can stop bad things from happening to us. That's, yeah, not the truth, really.
What do you think being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as an adult has taught you about caring for clients, especially those living with chronic illness?
Mm. It's definitely taught me never to tell someone about how they should feel about their experience, which, like, I'm not saying I was doing that before,
Yeah.
but like, I've definitely had strange responses, which I think everyone who's been diagnosed with anything can tell you this, like, even cancer, like,
Mhm.
people have very strange responses. I've had people tell me that I'm lucky, like, because now I have to take really good care of myself for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm like, okay, that's,
Like, I don't think that means I'm lucky.
I don't think I'm lucky. Yeah. Also, like, I wasn't taking bad care of myself. Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's definitely taught me like not to tell someone how they should feel about something for sure. Like, and I try really hard even when I'm like helping people reframe stuff. Like, I think I've just become the kind of therapist that's like, I'm not going to tell you that this is okay. This sucks. like, and I'm not gonna make you look for a silver lining.
Mhm.
You can be upset about this for as long as you want, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it also just gave me a lot of empathy for people who have to live with like chronic illnesses, chronic pain in particular. Like that is a whole other beast. Like I'm not in pain all the time, and I'm so grateful. The people who are like I'm doing like this mental load, and so now I understand like when you're sick, there's just like so much mental load and there's so much financial load.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely helped me understand that more and like and then encourage my clients to make space for themselves, because the rest of the world, like if you're not sick, if you're not in pain, if you have enough money, like it's like, oh, so that's just a thing that you think about sometimes. And like I understand that's something you have to think about all the time and like how exhausting that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like and the world is like, well, you just deal with it. Just take care of it and just deal with it. And we don't really want to hear about it because it makes us feel uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? And so then we kind of like tell ourselves that like to minimize it, right? Like you just need to push through,
Mhm.
like you just need to like ignore your body because it's getting in the way of you being normal. And then we make ourselves more sick, right?
Yeah.
And so really encouraging my clients to honor their illness and
Mhm.
like honor the messages their body's giving them because it is doing the best it can to help them survive. And that's just like not going to look like able-bodied people's experiences, right?
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah, and shaming it isn't going to change it.
Yeah. So it won't change it. It
Mm-mm.
is dealing with chronic illness, chronic pain, and having to interact with other people is requires you to understand that two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
That you can be grateful your illness isn't worse and be really frustrated, angry, fearful, ashamed that you are having to deal with it all the time.
Hmm.
And those don't cancel each other out. You can be grateful for the life that you have. You can be grateful for the resources that you have and still be struggling.
Yeah.
You don't have to choose one or the other.
Yeah, you really don't. And when you stop trying to choose, then you just naturally go through ebbs and flows that feel much more manageable than like what I did for a year and a half of like feeling intensely angry or sad and then ignoring it, right? And like um I was definitely like pushing myself really hard because I think a lot of people who have had near death experiences do this, right? Where it's like, I want to live as much as possible, Which like I did a lot of cool stuff. I went a lot of cool places. I met a lot of wonderful people. And like I just realized like I was so tired. Like
Mhm.
so yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that you didn't. It, again, the two things can be true, that you can be so grateful for those experiences and happy that you've had them, and know, oh, it's not healthy for me to push my body that hard all of the time
Right.
in the name of living life fully.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But also, what cool things did you get to do?
Yeah, I went on like trips with friends, went to like Costa Rica. I went to New Orleans for my birthday with a group of people. I started writing a novel, which is something I
Mhm.
always wanted to do. And like that shift when I like accepted like, oh, like no one's really safe, bad things can happen anytime. I was like, oh, well, like I better just like start doing stuff I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, I'd just been so focused on my career that I stopped writing. And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna like write a book now. So I'm doing that, which is really cool. And just investing in like my friendships and like going out and doing stuff in the city, like seeing art and yeah, connecting. And it all felt good, like really awesome and fun and
Yeah.
amazing. And I'm glad I did it all. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to check in and ask myself, is this coming from like a place of like feeling like I have to do something, or is it coming
Mhm.
from a place of like I want to do something?
Okay. So part of setting that boundary for yourself is asking that question of, do I feel like I have to? Because I
Hmm.
have to enjoy my life.
Yeah.
Or do I genuinely want to do this?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe also, how much am I having to push through to be able to do this versus actually having the energy and mental space?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely a hard balance sometimes. Um, but easier now that I'm aware of it for sure.
Yeah. No, it feels like sometimes if I had to wait for me to have enough energy to do things, I I wouldn't do anything.
No. Yeah. Fully.
So it's so hard because
Yeah.
sometimes you do have to make yourself do things that you want to do, but it is finding that line, the fine line of, well, when are you pushing yourself beyond your capacity?
Yes. Yeah. It was definitely one of my friends said this to me. He was like, it was kind of like watching a kitten try to drink from a fire hose. And I was like,
Watching a kitten try to drink from a fire hose.
yeah.
Wow.
I was like,
That
wow,
is a
vivid,
visual.
vivid. Yeah. Yeah.
So things, a lot is better now.
Mm.
What's still hard?
I mean, trying not to get stuck in that moralizing, like, or anxiety. Like, I didn't work out today.
Mhm,
So, like, my sugar levels might be too high, right? And that's bad. I'm bad, right? Like,
mhm,
I'm a bad diabetic. I'm bad at taking care of myself. Like, it's sometimes I have to be like, okay, like, you were tired. Like, it's okay,
mhm.
right? That, and just, yeah, the mental load of like, I don't have a pump or like a pod. I tried a pod out when I first got diagnosed and it was like so much. I was like, screw this. I'm gonna try it out again
Wait,
because
I know what an insulin pump is, but I don't know what a pod is.
it's similar. It's smaller and it's not, it's like more similar to Dexcom. It's not like a pump is like semi-permanent, like
Mhm,
attached to you. And like the pod is like it's like literally a little pod and it has your lasting insulin and your short-term insulin.
mhm.
Um, and it gives you like continuous like long term insulin throughout the day and night
Okay.
and then you have a little remote that you like can give yourself short acting insulin with before you eat meals.
Okay.
So it's really funny. I always kind of feel like I'm like carrying around like a detonator because you have to like carry around like your like phone and your
The
like
insulin
remote
detonator.
detonator. Yeah, it's very silly. And like hopefully one day, like now pumps are connected to Bluetooth and so you can just do it with your phone.
Mhm.
But no, I'm just not ready for that. I don't know if I ever will be, and that's okay
Yeah.
with um
You get to manage your diabetes how you want to.
yes, I do. Um so like that's supposed to like remove some of like the mental load, but like it's still like you have to keep track of like when you need to go pick up your insulin from the pharmacy or your pod or your Dexcom and like if you're going on vacation, like you have to make sure to pack all those things. And I always pack like a glucose monitor, one that you prick yourself.
Yeah.
Is like if your Dexcom doesn't work or like your phone stops working, like you need like a fail safe.
Mhm.
Um, and then like there's just like insulin in all of my bags, like like needles everywhere. And of course they're capped, like they're not just like out. But like you just never I keep some like at my partner's place, like um and just like the mental load of like I have to take my long acting insulin once a day, like around the same time, and like I have to remember before I leave the house if I'm going to be out of the house at that time that I have to take it, right? Or like, oh, you were going to like just maybe have a bite of a cupcake. You need to look at your blood sugar levels and decide if that's worth it. If you want to give yourself a shot of insulin, how much insulin? Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
just
It never stops.
it never stops. Yeah, and sometimes it is, especially on days when I'm just like either my body is not super modulated or I'm just like, user error, right? Where I'm like, oh, shit, I like ate a meal and I forgot to give myself insulin.
Yeah.
Like those days are really frustrating. The extreme highs, the extreme lows, because it's
Mhm.
also uncomfortable for your body. Like I can tell when my blood sugar is too low for sure.
Mhm.
And like if it gets too high, my body has a reaction as well. So it's just those are like those days happen less and less.
Mhm.
And that's great. And like that's partly because I have a really good doctor. And
Mhm.
that's partly because I've decided like that my body's worth taking care of. But it still happens and it still sucks. So that part stinks too.
Well, I just feel really proud of you for doing the work to get to a place where you feel like your body is worth taking care of and where you can pay attention to your body again.
Yeah.
And I think being a therapist can make that even harder because we're like, yeah, I know how I'm supposed to take care of myself. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm fine. I'm taking care of myself. Leave me alone. And then
Hmm.
we have to, instead of holding other people's vulnerability, we have to have our own and ask for help and get help. And
Yeah,
that is hard to do.
it is. It is. And it's also so annoying that everything I suggest other people do works for me.
It's wild that that happens.
So rude. Yeah,
That
journaling every day.
therapeutic tools might be
Yeah,
helpful.
taking a little walk, like actually giving yourself a snack. Like, yeah, very rude. What a plot twist. But yeah, so
Well,
I
speaking
will
of
say
that,
to all
oh
the
no,
clients out there, we do try to do those things and they do actually work. We're not just
okay,
saying,
all right. So, what are your diabetes management tips here?
oh God, go to therapy.
Go to therapy.
Think about
Absolutely.
diabetes since childhood. It's still such like a black and white perceived thing, and you have probably internalized that. And there's a really high percentage of type 1 diabetes patients. I
Mhm.
think it's like I don't remember the statistic, and I hate it when people make them up, so I'm not going to. But it's a really high percentage of us that are like have eating disorders as a way to manage our diabetes.
Yeah.
Um, so like,
I was preparing for the presentation we're going to be doing on chronic illness coming up
yes,
in the next month. And I think the rate of depression, specifically depression, for people diagnosed with diabetes is 27%.
ugh,
Um,
yeah,
and that's only counting depression, not any other mental health disorders.
yeah, yeah. So I would say definitely therapy. There's just so much baked into this particular diagnosis, especially and like I and my type 2 brothers and sisters and theys like that is a whole other beast. Like that is even more stigmatized and like moralized, right? But yeah, so
I one
don't
in
talk.
five,
Yeah, 1 in 5
one
has.
in five people with diabetes have an eating disorder.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes
It's
sense
hard not to when you have to be hyper vigilant
all the
about
time,
your food all the time.
all the time. Yeah, it's exhausting. And I would like, and I would also like encourage people to like encourage their friends and family to do their own research and like really think about how they speak to them, right?
Mhm.
And like to not let people boss them around. Like I think there's also like this like people are trying to be helpful and they're like, "Oh, should you eat that? Is it okay for you to eat that?" And it's like,
Mhm.
"I'm a grown adult. Like, please trust me." You know? So I would say like remember to stick up for yourself. And then just like what I said earlier, right? Take care of yourself. Like whatever that looks like. And I think trying to remember that like you versus your body, that's like an endless battle that no one's gonna win, right? Like as soon as you decide like that you and your body are gonna like take the challenge on together, that's when things get better. So paying attention to it, feeding it when it's hungry, you know, like taking your insulin, advocating for yourself at the doctor's office, like resting. It's so easy to be like, I should have worked out today. Like that would bring my blood sugar down. It's like, yeah, it's also okay to rest. It's also okay when you're sick that your sugars are out of control, like just giving yourself grace. It's just not simple, you know. And then like there's more practical things where I'm like, make sure you have food in your house you like to eat. Like make it easy for yourself to access it, like and sign up for auto refills on your pharmacy.
Absolutely.
You don't have to
All right,
keep.
I'm going to write down some of your tips so that we can make sure to share them along with this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
And I,
I'll come up with some better ones too, but just off the top of my head, yeah.
all right, let's have some self-compassion right now. Those were excellent
Okay,
tips.
you're right.
I
There's
love
my
them.
perfectionistic tendencies popping up. Yeah.
I know. Well, you know what I did this morning? I made a sign to hang in my kitchen that said progress, not perfection.
Mm,
Because wild notion.
yeah.
Um, a lot of us struggle with perfection,
Yeah.
perfectionism.
And something I
And
realized is it keeps us from being consistent and that for me especially like is what keeps me healthier is like just focusing on small consistencies like instead of all or nothing, you know.
yeah, and like missing something or messing something up or making any kind of mistake. It's just that. It's just a mistake.
It's a mistake.
And if we are hyper focused on the fact that we made a mistake or that we didn't do something exactly right, then it doesn't allow us to take the next step to just keep moving and keep working to go forward.
Yeah,
We get stuck.
we get stuck and then we yeah get really down on ourselves at the same time, like it reinforces those negative beliefs we might have about ourselves, right? Like
Yeah.
that
And
also keeps us from getting up again.
mhm. And especially when you're having to make huge lifestyle changes because of a new diagnosis, you're
Hmm.
not going to be perfect at making all of those changes overnight.
No.
You have to do one thing at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what matters. Like there's always tomorrow. There's always later this afternoon. Like
Yeah. There's always later this afternoon. That's perfect.
yeah, like there's always an hour from now, like and yeah, and I just life's too short to be unkind to yourself, to be unkind to your body. That's definitely something I learned. Like, if it is true that we're never really like safe, right? Like, do I want to do we want to approach life from this place of being unhappy and not doing the things that are going to make us feel good long term, or do we want to do them?
Life's too short to be unkind to yourself, to be unkind to your body.
Mhm.
I'm going to remember that.
Yeah. I hope I will too. I'm like, I should go write that down somewhere. I'm like
I
a
know
note.
we are writing it down. I'm gonna like put it on the notes of this podcast so that I don't forget that.
And it also applies, like, I don't mean that in a like be unkind to your body, like, so therefore you have to eat good all the time or what, or good, whatever the fuck that means, right?
Hmm.
Exercise XYZ times a week. It's like sometimes being good to your body means giving it a sweet treat, right? Or taking
Yeah,
a nap or going and sitting in the sun. It deserves pleasure too. As much as it deserves consistency, it deserves pleasure.
absolutely it does. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for
I,
asking me so many like thoughtful, also very well researched questions. It was so nice to be thought of and held. Like it felt like we were like sharing it, and it was really cool.
well, um, you are dealing with and carrying a lot every single day, and that deserves to be acknowledged too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, we will be back with another podcast in 2 weeks. We are also starting a Lunch and Learn series in which we are going to provide um, very low cost $10 CEUs for people for an hour at lunchtime once a month so that we can have more of an opportunity to share how do we take care of people who are dealing with some of the things that we're talking about on this podcast too.
Mhm.
So we will see y'all in 2 weeks. And SJ, thank you so much again. This
Yeah,
was a wonderful podcast.
yeah, this was great. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.